The dark gravy dripping down the white wall looked like an open wound, dark and thick, just like my pride felt at that exact moment. My name is Evelyn. I am 68 years old, and for 4 decades my hands fed this entire county. But in my own house, apparently, I am a burden. What my daughter-in-law Jessica did not know, while she wiped her mouth with fake disgust, is that the one who pays for the banquet always decides when the table is cleared. The sound of the ceramic plate shattering against the floor was not what hurt the most. It was the silence before it, that eternal second when Jessica tasted the first spoonful of the stew that took me 2 days to prepare. I roasted the chilies, ground the spices in the antique stone mortar I inherited from my grandmother, and watched over the cooking like someone watching a newborn baby. I did it because it was Sunday, because I wanted to please them, because I wanted to feel useful in this house that supposedly belongs to my son, but where I seem like an old piece of furniture shoved into a corner. "This food is horrible," Jessica yelled, jumping to her feet as if the taste had offended her personally. With a sharp movement of her hand, showing off a flawless manicure paid for with the money I give my son, she pushed the plate. The piece of chicken covered in the dark sauce flew until it hit the dining room wall and fell to the floor, splashing my orthopedic shoes. "You are useless, even at cooking, you useless old woman," she shrieked in that high-pitched voice she uses when she wants to play the victim. "This tastes like dirt, pure dirt. You're trying to poison us." My grandchildren, Sam and Chloe, 10 and 12 years old, burst out laughing. It was not a nervous laugh. It was a cruel, mocking laugh, the kind children learn when they see adults lose respect for their elders. They covered their mouths and pointed at the stain on the wall, looking at me out of the corner of their eyes to see my reaction. My son, Robert, did not even look up from his cell phone. He just sighed, as if his wife's tantrum were a minor annoyance, like the buzzing of a fly, and not a direct insult to the mother who broke her back so he could become an accountant. "Mom, please," Robert muttered without looking at me. "You know Jessica cannot handle heavy spices. Next time, make something simple. Some sandwiches or order pizza. Do not make a scene." "A scene?" I was sitting down, my hands crossed in my lap, trembling slightly but without shedding a single tear. For 40 years I owned Evelyn's Kitchen, the most respected diner in the area. I have fed mayors, construction workers, brides at their weddings, and families in their grief. My cooking built this town. For this woman who cannot tell parsley from cilantro to tell me I am useless at cooking, it was more than an offense. It was a sick joke. But I did not say anything. Dignity, at my age, sometimes disguises itself as silence. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked, that familiar sound that reminds me of the years I spent standing in front of industrial stoves. I went to the kitchen for a rag and a bucket. No one moved to help me. Jessica dropped into her chair, huffing and fanning herself with her hand, as if she were the victim. "I am going to order sushi," she announced, pulling out her latest model smartphone, "because this is inedible. And you, Robert, give the kids some money so they can buy something decent." I knelt on the cold floor. The sauce smelled of chocolate, cinnamon, roasted almonds, and smoked chilies. It smelled of history, of tradition. I started picking up the broken ceramic pieces, careful not to cut my fingers, those fingers that Jessica now considered useless. While I wiped the sauce off the baseboard, I listened to them place their fast food order, spending happily without caring about the cost. "Order the large combo, Mom, the one with the cream cheese rolls," Chloe said without even looking back at her grandmother, who was at her feet, cleaning up her mess. I finished cleaning. I washed the dirty dishes left in the sink, including the large pots where I had prepared the rice and the stew. The soapy water was hot, and I focused on the feeling of the suds on my hands so I would not scream. I washed in silence, my back straight, looking out the window at the small backyard garden I had planted myself, which was now full of the kids' discarded toys and Jessica's cigarette butts. When I finished, I dried my hands on my apron. That embroidered apron my employees gave me when I closed the business 3 years ago. For the toughest and fairest boss, the dedication read. They respected me. They knew who Evelyn was. Here, in this modern house with white walls and minimalist furniture, I was just the old woman. I retreated to my room, a small bedroom on the first floor that used to be the study. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was pounding, not from sadness, but from a cold, calculating fury. I took my most prized possession out of my nightstand. It is not a jewel nor a photo. It is an accounting ledger, one of those hardback ones with grid paper, its spine worn from use. There, with my tight and clear handwriting, I have kept the accounts of my life since I was 20 years old. I opened the current page. My eyes scanned the numbers. The sale of my diner was good, very good. I invested most of it in the down payment for this house, so Robert and his family could live with dignity. I have the rest saved and invested. But there was one detail that Jessica, in her arrogance as a young, modern woman, had forgotten or perhaps never wanted to know. The account at Arthur's Gourmet Market. 2 years ago, when I moved in with them, Jessica complained that the money was not enough for the quality food she, according to her, deserved. Robert, always overwhelmed by his wife's credit card debt, looked at me with pleading eyes. I, being a mother in the end, offered a solution. I opened an open line of credit at the most expensive and exclusive market in the area, owned by an old friend of mine, Arthur. Get whatever you need, I told them. I will go and pay off the account at the end of every month. And boy, did they get things. I reviewed the latest receipts Arthur had sent me by message. Imported cheeses, expensive wines, premium cuts of meat, fine chocolates, ridiculously overpriced organic products. Jessica did not cook, but she loved having the pantry full of luxuries to show off to her friends when they came over for coffee. She thought that flow of merchandise was a divine right, or maybe she thought Robert paid for it. She never stopped to think about where the smoked salmon she loved so much for breakfast came from. Useless old woman, she had called me. You are useless, even at cooking. I ran my hand over the paper, smoothing it out. If I am useless at cooking, then I must also be useless at providing the ingredients. If my food is garbage, then they do not deserve the queen's food they devour at my expense. I stood up and went to the mirror. I saw my gray hair, my wrinkles, but I also saw the firm gaze of the woman who built a business from nothing when her husband died, leaving her with a young son and a lot of debt. That woman had not disappeared. She was only asleep, lulled by a mother's love and the hope of being a beloved grandmother. But love cannot be a rug where others wipe their feet. I heard the doorbell. The sushi had arrived. I heard the laughter, the sound of packages opening. No one knocked on my door to ask if I wanted a bite. No one remembered that the useless old woman had not eaten anything since breakfast. Better this way. Hunger clears the mind. I picked up my cell phone. It was a simple model with large buttons, but it worked perfectly for what I needed to do. I searched the contacts. Arthur, Market. I hesitated for a second. I knew this would start a war. Robert would come complaining to me. Jessica would get hysterical. But then I looked at my shoes. Still with a small stain of gravy I had not managed to completely clean off. I remembered my grandchildren's laughter. That laugh hurt me more than the yelling, because that laugh meant they were learning to despise effort, to despise their roots, to despise the hand that feeds them. I was not doing it out of revenge, I told myself, although a part of me enjoyed the thought. I was doing it for their education. Sometimes, the most valuable lesson enters through an empty stomach. Tomorrow was Monday, the day Jessica usually went to the market to do her weekly grocery shopping, filling 2 carts with things that often ended up expiring in the trash because she was too lazy to prepare them. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. I dialed the number, even though I knew Arthur was already home at this hour. He always answered. Hello? Evelyn? My old friend's raspy voice sounded on the second ring. Did something happen, woman? It is 9 at night. Hello, Arthur. Forgive the hour, I said with my firm voice. that voice I used to give orders in the kitchen during rush hour. "I need to ask you a favor for first thing tomorrow morning. It is about Robert's house account." "Of course, tell me. Do you want me to send them something special? We just got some imported ham that—" "No, Arthur," I interrupted him, gripping the phone tightly. "I want you to cancel it." "What?" he asked, confused. "Cancel what?" "The credit account, Arthur. Close it. Block it. Starting tomorrow at 8 in the morning, nobody, absolutely nobody, other than me in person, can take so much as a piece of gum on credit under my name. If my daughter-in-law shows up with a full cart, you charge her every last cent in cash or on her own cards. And if she cannot pay, then she can put the merchandise back on the shelves." There was silence on the other end of the line. Arthur had known me for 30 years. He knew I did not make rash decisions. "Are you sure, Evelyn? You know the bill is large. Jessica takes expensive things." "I am absolutely sure. The party is over, Arthur. Tomorrow the diet begins." I hung up the phone and left it on the nightstand. I took off my stained shoes and lay back on the bed, listening to the laughter that still came from the dining room. They were laughing with their mouths full of Japanese food, unaware that the ground beneath their feet was about to move. "You are useless, even at cooking," I repeated in my mind, tasting the words as if they were bitter candy. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, when Jessica tried to go through the cash register with her wines and French cheeses, she was going to discover that the useless old woman had a secret ingredient she never saw coming: the power of the signature. And I was going to be sitting in my armchair, knitting quietly, waiting for the explosion. The morning light came through my bedroom window, but it did not bring its usual warmth. The sun felt cold on my legs as I sat on the edge of the bed, barefoot, touching the laminate wood flooring I paid for myself. It was 6 in the morning. My body, accustomed to decades of waking up early to turn on the stoves at Evelyn's diner, woke up on its own. No alarm needed. I went out into the hallway. The house was quiet. A heavy silence charged with the bad energy of the night before. As I passed the dining room, I saw that the stain on the white wall had left a greasy trail, a ghost of the humiliation. Even though I cleaned it as best as I could, the porous paint had absorbed the grease from the chilies and almonds. It was a scar in my daughter-in-law's immaculate house. I walked into the kitchen. The smell was a disgusting mix of rancid soy sauce, raw fish that had spent too many hours out of the fridge, and the sweet, artificial scent of the vapes Jessica smokes. On the granite island, the black plastic sushi containers were piled up like towers of trash. Rice stuck to the table, chopsticks thrown on the floor, used napkins crumpled into balls. Nobody had cleaned anything. "Of course," I muttered to myself. "That is what the useless old woman is for." Out of habit, my hand went toward the coffee maker. I always left it ready the night before so Robert could have his freshly brewed coffee before leaving for the office. But my hand stopped in midair. I pulled my fingers back as if the machine were burning hot. Not today. I turned around and made myself some chamomile tea in my small tin mug, the one I brought from my old house and that Jessica hates because she says it looks tacky and poor. I sat at the breakfast nook, turning my back to the mess, and took out my ledger again. I needed to see the numbers in the daylight. The night sometimes distorts things. It makes them look like nightmares, but the sunlight reveals the harsh truth. I opened the notebook to the fixed expenses section. Electricity, $400, gas, $100. High-speed internet for the kids' games, $120. I read quietly, tracing each figure with my index finger, rough and calloused from work. Then I moved to the family support section, a euphemism I invented myself so I would not have to write Jessica's whims. The amounts were outrageous. Designer clothes for children who grow every 3 months and outgrow everything brand new. Trips to the VIP movie theater, gas for the SUV my daughter-in-law uses to go to the gym and get coffee with her friends, and of course, Arthur's account. I looked at the total for the last month at the gourmet market, $1,500 on food, And last night they told me that my stew, made with ingredients that cost less than $20 and 5 hours of love, was garbage. I got up and went to my room to look for a shoebox I keep in the back of my closet, under my knitted shawls. I pulled it out carefully and took off the lid. Inside, there were no shoes, but documents, yellowed papers, deeds, investment policies, and bank statements that arrive by mail and that I intercept before anyone sees them. I pulled out the statement for my main investment, the sale of the diner, plus the savings of 40 years of taking no vacations, buying no new clothes, mending socks, and recycling jars. The number at the bottom of the page had so many zeros that sometimes even I found it hard to believe. Robert knew I had some savings, but I never told him how much. He thought the money from the sale of the business had almost all gone into the down payment for this house. He did not know that that property, the old historic house where the diner was located, was worth 3 times more than he calculated because it was in a historic district. Poor Evelyn, Jessica's mother had told me once at a birthday party, thinking I could not hear her. Now that she no longer works, she is completely dependent on her children. What a sad old age. I let out a dry laugh, devoid of humor. Dependent. If they only knew. For years, I let them underestimate me. I let them think I was a simple old country woman, a lucky cook who now lived off the charity of her successful son. It suited them to think that. It made them feel powerful, benevolent. And I, out of love for my son, to avoid bruising his ego as a provider, played along. I paid the electric bill, saying, "Oh, son, I had a little money left over from my pension. Let me help you with the bill." I filled the fridge, saying, "I stopped by the market and saw this beautiful fruit. I brought it for the kids." But the help turned into an obligation, and the gratitude turned into a demand, and the demand last night turned into an insult. I heard footsteps on the stairs. They were heavy and fast. Robert. I put my papers back in the box and slid it under the bed. I walked out into the kitchen just as he was walking in, hurriedly adjusting his tie. He had bags under his eyes. Jessica had surely given him a long night of complaining about my attitude. "Good morning," he said dryly, without looking at me, searching for the coffee maker with his eyes. He stopped when he saw the machine turned off and empty. "Is there no coffee?" he asked, with a tone of incredulous reproach. "We are out of coffee," I lied. There were 2 full bags in the pantry bought by me, and I did not have time to go buy any. Robert snorted, annoyed. "Mom, please, you know I cannot function without coffee. Now I will have to stop at Starbucks, and I am running late." "Then hurry up, son. You do not want them to dock your pay for the day," I answered calmly, taking a sip of my tea. He looked at me for the first time that morning. There was surprise in his eyes. He was not used to me talking back to him, and much less to not having his breakfast ready. "Are you still mad about yesterday?" he asked, lowering his voice a bit. "Mom, Jessica was stressed. Do not take it personally." "I am not mad, Robert," I said. And it was true. Anger burns out fast. What I felt was a determination as cold as ice. I am just tired. I am just old, right? Useless, like they said. Nobody said you were useless in general, just that, well, that you do not cook like you used to. Palates change, Mom. "Yes, palates change." I nodded, looking at the sushi trash. "They get expensive." Robert shook his head, as if I were talking nonsense. He grabbed his keys and left, slamming the door. Not a kiss, not a thank you, not a sorry. I was alone again, but not for long. At 10 in the morning, the queen of the house came down. Jessica appeared in the kitchen in her pink silk robe and fuzzy slippers. She had a hydrating mask on her face and her phone glued to her ear. "Yes, girl, you have no idea, a nightmare. I had to order food because the old lady made a mess." "Uh-huh. Yes, poor thing, she is losing it. I think it is senile dementia or something." She saw me sitting at the breakfast nook, knitting a scarf, and did not even flinch. She kept talking about me as if I were just another piece of furniture. "Well, I will let you go. I have to go to the grocery store. There is nothing decent in this house. I am going to Arthur's to get cold cuts and those cheeses we liked the other time. Yes, yes, I will pick you up and we will go. Bye. She hung up and looked at me with disdain. Evelyn, I am going out. Make sure you clean up this pigsty in the kitchen. You left everything a mess last night, she said, pointing at the sushi containers they had left. I felt a twinge in my stomach, but I took a deep breath. All right, Jessica, I said submissively. Drive safely. Oh, and do not make anything for dinner. I am going to bring some ribeye steaks. Robert is going to grill them tonight. You can make yourself some soup or something if you want. She turned around, making her robe flutter, and went upstairs to get dressed. Enjoy your trip, dear, I thought, and a small smile formed on my lips. Half an hour later, I saw her leave. She looked flawless. Designer jeans, white linen blouse, huge sunglasses, and her designer bag slung over her shoulder. She got into the SUV and drove off. I stayed at the window, watching the vehicle drive away. I knew exactly what was going to happen. The trip to Arthur's Market took about 15 minutes. Jessica would take an hour walking the aisles, filling the cart with gluttony and arrogance. She would choose the most expensive bottles of wine, truffle oils, Belgian chocolates. She would feel like the owner of the world, strolling among the shelves, greeting the employees with that fake kindness she uses with service workers. I looked at the wall clock, 10:30. I went to my room and looked for my cell phone. I had a text message from Arthur. Everything is set, Evelyn. I already gave the instruction to the cashiers and the manager. The account is locked with a note. Exclusive authorization from the account holder. Are you sure you do not want me to let you know when she arrives? I replied with my clumsy but determined fingers. No need. Just do what I asked. And thank you, old friend. I sat in my favorite armchair, the only piece of furniture they let me bring from my old house. A floral upholstered wingback chair that clashed horribly with the living room's minimalist decor. I pulled out my knitting needles. Knitting has always helped me think. Knit one. Purl one. Life is like that. Sometimes things go straight. Sometimes they get twisted. For 40 years, I was the silent provider, the invisible force. When my husband died, everyone thought the diner would go bankrupt in a month. Evelyn knows nothing about business, the men in town used to say. Evelyn only knows how to cook. But Evelyn knew how to count. Evelyn knew that if you buy corn straight from the farmer, you save 20%. Evelyn knew that if you treat your employees well, they do not steal your food. Evelyn learned to read contracts by candlelight when the children were sleeping. And now, Evelyn knew that power is not always shown by yelling or throwing plates. Sometimes, power is simply turning off the faucet. I remembered Jessica's face last night, her look of disgust when she tasted my stew. That recipe is from my great-grandmother. It takes 4 types of chilies, raisins, almonds, plantains, artisanal chocolate, cinnamon, cloves, anise. It is a symphony of flavors that requires patience and respect. To say it tastes like dirt is to have no soul. But what hurt me the most was not the insult to my cooking. It was the insult to my existence. To her, I was an expense, a burden taking up space. She did not see that the SUV she drove was paid for with the profits from my cooking. She did not see that my grandchildren's private school was paid for with the dividends from my investments. She saw the world upside down. She believed Robert was the rich one and I was the poor one. Robert, my son, is a good man, but he is weak with money. He spends what he does not have to please a woman who is never satisfied. And I, to keep from seeing him suffer, had plugged the holes in his ship with my own gold. Until today. The clock struck 11:15. My cell phone vibrated. It was not a call. It was a notification from the bank. I have an alert set up for the supplementary credit card I gave Robert for emergencies, which I know Jessica carries in her wallet just in case. Charge attempt. $850 at Arthur's Gourmet Market. Declined. Insufficient funds. Limit exceeded. I smiled. Last night, after talking to Arthur, I logged into the bank app and lowered the limit on that card to $5. Enough for a soda, but not for a feast. The house phone started ringing. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3 times. The sound echoed off the empty walls. I knew who it was. I could picture her at the cash register with the line of people behind her, swiping the card over and over again, her face red with embarrassment and fury. The landline stopped ringing, and almost immediately my cell phone began to ring. Jessica's photo appeared on the screen, a highly produced selfie where she was doing duck lips. I answered on the third ring, my voice calm and serene. "Hello? Evelyn." Jessica's scream almost shattered my eardrum. "Evelyn, you have to come to the market right now." "What is wrong, dear?" I asked, playing dumb. "Are you okay? It sounds very noisy." "No, I am not okay," she shrieked. In the background, I could hear the beep-beep of the cash registers and the murmurs of impatient people. "I am at the register, and the stupid cashier says the account is closed, that it will not go through, and Robert's card will not go through either. It says declined." "How strange," I said, smoothing my skirt. "Arthur never makes mistakes." "Well, he made a mistake. They have me standing here like an idiot with 2 full carts. People are staring at me. Talk to him. Tell him to let me take the things and you will come by later." I took a dramatic pause. I pictured the scene. Jessica in her expensive clothes, her sunglasses pushed up on her head, breaking into a cold sweat while the lady behind her nudged her heels with her own shopping cart. "I cannot do that, Jessica," I said softly. "What do you mean you cannot?" Her voice dropped a pitch, becoming dangerous. "You are friends with the owner. Ask him to put it on a tab." "The thing is," I sighed as if it were very hard to say. "Yesterday you made something very clear to me, Jessica. You told me I am a useless old woman, that I am not even good at cooking, and I got to thinking all night. If I am useless at cooking, I am surely useless at picking out ingredients too, let alone paying for them." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. The noise of the supermarket seemed to have stopped for her. "What are you talking about?" she whispered with a trembling voice. "I am talking about the fact that I canceled the account, Jessica, and I canceled the credit card." "What?" she screamed again in disbelief. "You cannot do this to me. I have the groceries for the week here. I have the steaks for dinner. I have guests coming over." "Well, I hope they like sushi," I replied. "Or maybe you can make them some sandwiches. You are young and useful. I am sure you will come up with something." "Evelyn, do not you dare. I am going to call Robert. I am going to tell him you are humiliating me." "Call him," I challenged her, feeling my heart pound, not out of fear but from adrenaline. "Tell him you are trying to spend $800 on gourmet food with his useless mother's money. Let us see what he tells you." "You are a witch," she spat. "I am heading to the house and you will see. I will be waiting for you right here." "But Jessica," my voice hardened, losing all of its grandmotherly sweetness, "do not you dare come home empty-handed if you want to eat today. Because in this house, starting right now, whoever does not contribute does not eat." I hung up. I stared at the phone for a few seconds before leaving it on the table. My hands were shaking a little, but it was a tremor of liberation. I felt light, as if a sack of rocks had been lifted from my back. I got up and went to the kitchen. The mess was still there. The smell of rancid fish was still there. But now the space felt different. It was no longer Jessica's territory where I was an intruder. It was now a battlefield, and I had just fired the first cannon shot. I grabbed a black trash bag and started throwing away the sushi containers. I did it with energy, with strength. I wiped the table, swept the floor, opened the windows to let the fresh air in and the smell of vice and laziness out. And when the kitchen looked decent, I opened the refrigerator. It was almost empty, except for some jars of fine jam and a few of Robert's craft beers. In the vegetable drawer, I found some wrinkled tomatoes, half an onion, and a few jalapeno peppers that had survived Jessica's purge. I also pulled out a bag of black beans I had hidden in my personal pantry. "Very well," I said out loud. "Today we are having slow-cooked beans and rustic salsa, poor people's food, as she calls it." I put the beans on to cook. The sound of boiling water and the earthy smell of herbs started filling the kitchen, displacing the scent of expensive disinfectant Jessica used. It was the smell of my life, the smell of my strength. I sat down to wait. I knew the storm was coming. Robert would call me at any moment, furious, ashamed, manipulated by his wife's screams. Jessica would arrive like a fury, ready to destroy me. But what they did not know was that I had a plan. This was just the beginning. The supermarket money was only the tip of the iceberg. If Jessica thought being humiliated at the cash register was the worst thing that could happen to her, she had no idea what was coming. I looked at my hands, those hands that yesterday cleaned dark gravy off the floor. Today, those same hands had closed into a fist and cut off the supply, and it felt good. It felt powerful. I heard the SUV's engine roar in the driveway, car doors slamming, heels stomping on the concrete furiously. The front door flew open. "Where are you?" Jessica yelled from the living room. I smiled, grabbed my wooden spoon, and tasted the bean broth. It needed salt. "I am right here, dear," I muttered to myself, "and I am not going anywhere." This useless old woman had just declared war, and I have never, ever lost a fight in my kitchen. The door slam echoed off the walls of the house like a cannon shot, making even the kitchen windows vibrate. Jessica came in like a hurricane, her face twisted in a mix of smeared makeup and a rage that made her eyes bloodshot. She threw her designer bag onto the granite island with such violence that I heard the crunch of something breaking inside it. Maybe her sunglasses or maybe her own ego. I did not even flinch. I kept stirring the wooden spoon inside the clay pot, making sure the beans did not stick, enjoying the earthy, honest aroma that began to fill the air, defying the synthetic smell of her expensive perfume. "You are a bitch!" she screamed, digging her perfectly manicured nails into the surface of the table. "You humiliated me in front of all those people." Mrs. Castillo was in the next line. "She saw me give back the imported ham, Evelyn. She saw me taking the wine bottles out of the bag like a thief." I looked up slowly, with that calmness that only comes from age and a clear conscience. "Good afternoon, Jessica. Would you like a piece of cornbread? The beans are almost ready." "Shut up with your beans," she shrieked, kicking the air. "I talked to Robert. He is on his way here. I told him everything. I told him you went crazy, that you canceled my cards, that you made a fool out of me. You will regret this, old woman." "If Robert is coming, that is good," I replied, tasting the broth and nodding in satisfaction at the flavor. "He can eat a hot meal. It has been a long time since he ate real food, the kind that nourishes and does not just fill you up." Jessica stood there with her mouth open, breathing heavily. She did not know what to do. She was used to me lowering my head, apologizing for existing, pulling out my wallet to fix her tantrums. Seeing the useless old woman standing firmly in front of the stove, not trembling, completely threw her off. She put her hands to her head, pulling her ash-blonde dyed hair. "Why?" she asked, dropping her voice to a venomous hiss. "Why are you doing this to me? Because I said your food was ugly, is that why? How childish you are." "It is not about the food, dear," I said, wiping the rim of the pot with a damp cloth. "It is about memory. It seems you forgot who pays for the party, and when you forget who is playing the music, sometimes you are left without a dance." Right then, the front door opened again. Hurried, heavy footsteps. Robert. My son walked into this kitchen with a red face, loosening his tie as if it were suffocating him. He looked at Jessica, who immediately burst into tears. A dry cry, no tears, but very loud. And then he looked at me. "Mom!" he exclaimed, with the voice of a tired man who wants no trouble, but does not know how to solve it either. "What is going on? Jessica calls me, hysterical, at the office. She says she could not pay for the groceries, that the supplementary card did not go through. What did you do?" "I did what I had to do, Robert," I said calmly, turning off the stove burner. "Sit down. Do you want some lemonade? I made a fresh pitcher." "I do not want lemonade." Robert slammed his palm on the table. "I want to know why you blocked the credit at Arthur's. Why did you lower the limit on the card? Jessica had to leave 2 full shopping carts behind. Food that I pay for, I clarified, looking him straight in the eyes. And since yesterday you made it very clear to me that I am useless and that my judgment in the kitchen is worthless, I decided to save you the trouble of relying on my bad taste. If I am useless at cooking, Robert, I am also useless at financing banquets that end up smeared on my wall. Robert stayed quiet for a second, processing my words. He glanced sideways at the greasy stain still faintly visible on the dining room wall. He knew what I was talking about, even if he preferred to ignore it. But Mom, that was a moment of anger, he tried to justify, dropping his guard. Jessica was stressed, but you cannot leave us without groceries, the kids. What are the kids going to eat? Right at that moment, as if summoned by the mention of their needs, Sam and Chloe came downstairs. They came with their tablets in hand, oblivious to the drama, or perhaps used to ignoring it as long as their screens were on. Mom, I am hungry, Sam said without looking up from his game. Did the groceries arrive? I want my chocolate cereal, the one from the imported box. And I want the Greek yogurt with honey, Chloe added, dropping into a chair. And the fast internet is gone, Dad. It is super slow. My videos will not load. Jessica sobbed louder, looking for her husband's sympathy. Do you see it, Robert? She moaned. Your children are hungry, and your mother has us on bread and water. I dried my hands on my apron and walked to the pantry. I pulled out a package of corn tortillas, the simple kind, no organic brands or whole wheat wraps. I placed the griddle on the stove and started warming them up. The smell of toasted corn filled the kitchen, an ancestral aroma that clashed with the sterile modernity of the stainless steel appliances. There is no imported cereal today, Sam, I said with a firm but loving voice. No Greek yogurt either, Chloe. Today we have slow-cooked black beans, freshly made, with herbs and onions, and we have warm tortillas and rustic salsa. The kids wrinkled their noses in unison, a gesture they had perfectly copied from their mother. Gross, Chloe said. I do not want that. That is food for the people who clean for us. Chloe, Robert warned, but without much conviction. It is food, little girl, I chimed in, flipping a tortilla with my fingers, immune to the heat. And it is what we have. In this house today, this is the menu. If you do not like it, you can go check the fridge and see what you find. Sam ran to the fridge and threw it wide open. His face of disappointment was poetry. There is nothing, he yelled. There is only water and ugly vegetables. Mom, order pizza. Jessica looked at Robert with pleading eyes. Robert, give them money. Order some pizzas. They cannot eat that. It will make them sick. They are not used to so much fat. Robert sighed and pulled out his wallet. He opened it and frowned. It was empty of cash. Of course, Jessica always squeezed every last bill out of him for her small expenses. I do not have cash, he mumbled. I will order through the app. He took out his cell phone and started typing. I kept warming up tortillas, stacking them in a straw basket I wove years ago. I served myself a deep bowl of beans, steaming and dark. I put a spoonful of red salsa on them and sat at the head of the table, the spot Robert usually occupied. I started eating. The first bite was glorious, the taste of my land, of my effort. I ate with pleasure, making noise when I bit into the crispy tortilla, ignoring my daughter-in-law's looks of disgust. Damn it, Robert muttered, staring at his screen. What is wrong? Jessica asked. The card was declined on the pizza app. I smiled internally, but my face remained a mask of serenity as I blew on my spoon. What do you mean, declined? Jessica stepped closer to him. Try the other one, the blue one. That is the one I am using. It says insufficient funds. How strange. My paycheck was just deposited yesterday. I set my spoon down on the plate with a soft clink. It is not strange, son, I said, wiping my mouth with a paper napkin. It is math. Everyone turned to look at me. Robert looked at me with a mix of fear and confusion. What do you mean, Mom? I stood up slowly and went to my room. I came back with the accounting ledger, that old, worn notebook that Jessica always looked at with contempt. I opened it to the page marked with a red bookmark and placed it in front of Robert, pushing it gently across the cold granite. "Look at the numbers, Robert. Read them out loud." Robert hesitated but looked down. House mortgage, $2,500. Monthly payment on Jessica's SUV, $900. Private school tuitions, $1,500. Credit cards, $3,000. His voice trailed off as he read. Total fixed monthly expenses, $8,000, not counting groceries or gas. "Exactly," I said, sitting back down to my beans. "Now tell me, how much do you make, son?" Robert turned pale. $5,000 net." $5,000, I repeated. "And you guys spend more than $10,000 a month if we add Jessica's whims at the gourmet market, going out, clothes, and coffees. Where did you think the difference came from, Robert? Out of thin air? By magic?" Silence. A heavy, dense silence that crushed the atmosphere. The kids had stopped complaining, sensing that something serious was happening. Jessica bit her lip, looking away, unable to hold my gaze. I thought, well, that you helped out with something, but," Robert stammered. "Helped out with something?" I let out a brief, dry laugh. "I paid the difference, Robert. I paid for half of this fantasy life you lead. The mortgage is in my name, even though you think you are the owner. I paid the down payment on the SUV, and I still pay the monthly bills. The credit card your wife uses is paid out of my savings account." I took a sip of water and continued, enjoying every word, every nail I hammered into the coffin of their ignorance. "For 2 years I have put my money, the money I earned burning my eyelashes and my hands at the diner, so you two could live like rich people. And I did not care. I did it for you, son. I did it for my grandchildren until yesterday." "Mom, please." Robert had tears in his eyes. He realized for the first time the magnitude of his blindness. "Yesterday I was called useless. Yesterday your wife threw my food at the wall. Yesterday my grandchildren laughed at me. And I understood something very important. You cannot support someone who despises you. It is a law of life, Robert. The parasite cannot kill the host because it dies too." Jessica reacted to the word parasite. "Do not call me that," she yelled, though with less force than before. "I take care of this house. I raise your grandchildren." "You have a maid who comes 3 times a week to clean, Jessica, and who I pay for," I reminded her coldly. "And your children. Your children laugh at their grandmother and think beans are servant food. Some upbringing." "So what then?" Robert asked, desperate. "Are you going to leave us on the street? Is that it?" "No, son, I'm not a monster. The house is still your home, for now, but the luxuries are over. The gourmet market is over. The supplementary credit cards are over. The magic money that appears in your account when you hit 0 in the middle of the month is over." I pointed at the clay pot. "Today we have beans. Tomorrow, who knows? If you want to eat something else, you will have to figure out how to pay for it with those $5,000 you make. And I am warning you, Robert, do your math right. Because the electric bill arrives next week and it is $400, and I am not going to pay it." Robert slumped in his chair, defeated. He looked at his children, who were watching him with wide eyes. "Dad, I am hungry," Sam moaned in a whisper. Robert looked at Jessica, expecting her to solve something, to pull an ace up her sleeve. But Jessica was paralyzed, realizing her gold card had turned into a worthless piece of plastic. "Eat the beans," Robert said in a hoarse voice, without looking at anyone. "But Dad," Chloe complained. "Eat the beans," Robert yelled, slamming the table so hard the water pitcher shook. "It is what we have. Your grandmother is right. We have no money." Robert's yell broke something in the family dynamic. The children, frightened, approached the table timidly. Jessica remained standing, indignant, her arms crossed, refusing to give in. "I am not eating that," she said haughtily. "I would rather eat nothing." "Suit yourself, dear," I said, serving a plate for Sam. "Fasting is very good for the spirit, and for the figure you care so much about." Sam tasted the beans suspiciously. He made a face at first, but then hunger won out. He grabbed a tortilla just like he had seen me do and kept eating. Chloe copied him shortly after. "These are good, Grandma," Sam mumbled with his mouth full, surprised. "Of course they are good," I replied, stroking his hair for the first time in months. "They have the secret ingredient. They are paid for." Robert served himself a plate in silence. He ate with his head down, humiliated, but feeding himself. I watched them from my spot like a general surveying the battlefield after the first skirmish. I had won the position, but the war was far from over. Jessica was still standing, looking at us with pure hatred. Her stomach growled, betraying her pride, but she held firm. She spun on her heel and marched out of the kitchen, her heels clicking loudly toward the living room. "This is not over, Evelyn," she threatened before walking out. "I will sell my jewelry if I have to, but I will not rely on your beans." "Go ahead," I yelled so she could hear me. "But check the receipts carefully, dear. Most of that jewelry was also paid for by the card I just canceled. Let us see if they do not claim them at the pawn shop." I heard her run up the stairs and slam her bedroom door. Robert finished eating and pushed his plate away. "Mom, we need to talk properly. We cannot live like this. I need you to reactivate everything. Just for this month. I promise we will adjust." I looked at him sadly. He still did not understand. He thought this was a temporary punishment, a slap on the wrist. He did not understand that the faucet had been turned off forever. And he did not know the worst part, that the house, this modern white house they bragged so much about, had a clause in the deed that I had insisted the notary include. A clause for a life estate and revocation of the gift due to ingratitude. But that I would save for later. "No, Robert, I am not reactivating anything. You are adults. You are an accountant. Figure it out. Learn to add and subtract again, because it seems you forgot that for the numbers to add up, you cannot spend more than you earn." I stood up, cleared my plate, and washed it. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, drying my hands. "Tomorrow, some men are coming to look at the yard." "What men?" Robert asked in alarm. "Landscapers? We already have a landscaper." "No, they are not landscapers. They are contractors. I am going to tear up the lawn and those decorative flowers Jessica likes so much." "What?" "Why? Because I am putting in a vegetable garden, son. Tomatoes, peppers, squash. If we are going to be poor, at least we are going to eat well. And since you say you have no money, well, the earth will feed us. Besides, I need the kids to learn where food comes from, so the next time they get the urge to throw it at the wall, they know how much it costs to grow it." Robert buried his face in his hands. "Jessica is going to die. She hates dirt." "Well, she better get used to it," I said, turning off the kitchen light and leaving them in the dimness of the falling evening, "because the useless old woman is just starting to work." I walked to my bedroom, feeling how the dynamics of the house had shifted. The air felt lighter for me and much heavier for them. I was no longer the shadow in the corner. I was now the keeper of the keys, the guardian of the pantry. I sat on my bed and took out my box of documents again. There was one paper in particular I wanted to reread. The title to a commercial space downtown, one I bought years ago and have kept rented out. The lease expired next month. I had always thought about selling it to the tenants to have more cash flow for my old age. But now, a new, bold, and brilliant idea was beginning to form in my mind. An idea that would make my beans today look like a royal feast compared to what was waiting for them. Jessica wanted a war. Robert wanted comfort. I only wanted respect. And I was willing to buy it, or rather collect it, with every cent of my assets. I smiled in the dark. Tomorrow would be a day of planting, and the harvest promised to be very interesting. 3 days. That was how long it took for my daughter-in-law's magazine cover house to turn into a silent, dusty battlefield. Hunger has a very curious way of erasing elegance, of stripping the shine off the varnish and leaving the raw wood exposed. 3 days without credit cards, without the gourmet market, and without my money flowing like an invisible river to plug their holes. I was in the kitchen chopping an onion for a simple breakfast hash. My eyes were not watering from the onion. My eyes no longer cried for anything in this house. The sound of the knife hitting the wooden cutting board kept a steady, almost military rhythm. Chop, chop, chop. Around me, the atmosphere felt heavy, charged with static electricity foreshadowing the final storm. The pantry, which used to overflow with imported cookies and Italian pastas with unpronounceable names, now displayed dark, empty spaces. Jessica had tried to keep up appearances the first day, ordering takeout with a credit card she had hidden away. But yesterday, I heard her screaming at the bank's automated phone system in the guest bathroom. Overdraft. That ugly word so common in the lives of people who want to live beyond their means. Robert shuffled into the kitchen, dragging his feet. His suit, usually spotless, looked wrinkled. He had not taken it to the dry cleaners because, surprise, the dry cleaner was also paid with my supplementary card. He poured himself a glass of tap water, something he previously considered an act of barbarism. "They cut off the internet, Mom," he said without looking at me, setting the glass down on the table with a hard thud. "Sam and Chloe cannot do their homework. I cannot check my work emails from here." "Then they will have to go to the public library, son," I replied without stopping my chopping. "The internet is free there, and maybe they will read a real book while they are at it." "This is not funny," he blew up, running his hands through his thinning hair. "We are living like homeless people in our own house. Jessica is locked in her room crying because she does not have her creams. The kids are unbearable, and you're just standing there, chopping an onion like nothing is happening." I set the knife down on the table and wiped my hands on my apron. "We are not living like homeless people, Robert. We are living on your actual salary. Welcome to the reality of the middle class that does not have a wealthy mother to sponsor them." Right then, Jessica's heels echoed on the stairs. She was coming down fast with that desperate energy of a cornered animal. She walked into the kitchen holding a jewelry box and a washed-out face. There was no more flawless makeup, and the dark roots of her dyed hair were starting to show, giving away that her weekly salon appointment had also been canceled. "I have had it," she yelled, slamming the velvet box onto the granite island. "I have had it with your moral lessons and your beans, Evelyn. If Robert does not have the guts to fix this, I am going to fix it." I looked at the box. I knew what was inside. A set containing a gold and sapphire necklace and earrings we gave her when she celebrated her 10th wedding anniversary, or rather, that I paid for and Robert handed to her. "What are you going to do, Jessica?" I asked in a soft, almost curious voice. "I am going to sell this," she said, opening the box with trembling hands. "It is worth a fortune. With this, we will pay the credit cards, get the internet turned back on, and stock the fridge with decent food. And then we will see what we do with you." Robert looked at her, scared but with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. The easy way out, selling assets to cover a pothole and keep rolling toward the cliff. "You cannot sell that," I said, picking up the knife again. "Of course I can," she shrieked, snapping the box shut. "It is mine. It was a gift." "It was a gift paid for with my money, Jessica. But that is not the point. The point is they will not even give you half of what you think it is worth, and that money will run out in 2 weeks at the rate you spend. And then what? Will you sell the furniture? The car?" "I will sell whatever I want," she interrupted, stepping closer to me with her index finger raised, pointing at my face. "This is my house. I decide what gets sold and what does not. And if you do not like it, pack your junk and get out to a nursing home, which is where you belong, you bitter old woman." The insult hung in the air, mixing with the smell of onion. Robert froze. He knew his wife had crossed a red line, a border from which there is no return. I sighed deeply. The moment had arrived. Patience is a virtue, they say, but strategy is a weapon. And I had the entire arsenal tucked under my bed. "Your house," I repeated slowly, savoring the words. What an interesting concept of ownership you have, Jessica. I walked to my bedroom. Nobody stopped me. I could hear Jessica whispering frantically to Robert. Tell her to leave. Tell her to leave right now. We will use the jewelry money to hire a lawyer and kick her out legally. I returned to the kitchen carrying a black leather binder. It was not the accounting ledger from the other day. This was something much more serious. It was the weight of the law, bound and stamped by a notary public. I placed the binder on the table, pushing aside the vegetable scraps. I opened it slowly, smoothing out the first page with the palm of my hand. "Sit down," I ordered. I did not yell, but my voice carried the tone of steel I used when negotiating with wholesale suppliers. No one disobeyed me when I used that tone. Robert sat down immediately. Jessica hesitated, hugging her jewelry box to her chest, but curiosity and fear got the best of her. She perched on the edge of the chair, looking at me with distrust. "Do you really believe this house is yours?" I started, looking Robert straight in the eyes. "Do you think that just because you live here, because you picked out the curtains, and because you host parties in the backyard, it belongs to you?" "The deed is in my name, Mom," Robert said, though his voice shook. It was obvious he was not entirely sure, that something in his memory was not clicking. "You came with me to the notary yourself 5 years ago." "That is right. We went to the notary and we signed a deed of gift. I gifted the property to you, but—" I took a dramatic pause, flipping the page until I reached the third clause, highlighted in fluorescent yellow. "Did you read what you signed, son? Or were you too busy bragging on Instagram that you had a new house?" I turned the binder toward them. "Read it right there, Robert, out loud. Clause of life estate and reservation of title." Robert leaned in, squinting. As he read, the color drained from his face until he was as gray as the ash of a smoked-out cigarette. "The donor, Evelyn Martinez, reserves for herself the life estate of the property, as well as the right to revoke this gift in the event of ingratitude, abandonment, or abuse by the donee or their direct family members." Jessica let out a nervous, incredulous laugh. "What does that mean? Speak in English, Robert." Robert looked up. His eyes were filled with terror. It means the house belongs to her, Jessica. Legally, she owns the right to use and enjoy the house as long as she lives. We only hold the bare title, which is like holding an empty shell. We cannot sell it, we cannot mortgage it, and the worst part—" "The worst part?" Jessica asked, feeling the ground open up beneath her designer feet. "The worst part is the ingratitude clause," I said, closing the binder gently. "The law is very clear. If the person who receives the gift or their family offends, abuses, or denies food to the giver, the gift is revoked. It becomes 100% mine again." I stood up and walked around the table, approaching Jessica. "Throwing my food at the wall is abuse, Jessica. Screaming 'useless old woman' at me is an offense. And telling me to get out to a nursing home? Well, that is pure ingratitude. I have witnesses. My grandchildren saw everything, and I have the grease stain on the wall as physical evidence." Jessica dropped the jewelry box. It hit the table with a dull thud. She covered her mouth with her hands, shaking her head. "No, it is not true. Robert, tell her she is lying." "She is not lying," Robert whispered, sinking into his chair. "Mom has always been very careful with paperwork. I thought it was just a formality. I never thought you would use it against us." "I am not using it against you, Robert. I am using it in my favor. I am protecting myself. Because I knew, deep down in my mother's heart that did not want to face reality, that someday your wife would try to throw me out on the street. And look, I was not wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the distant hum of the empty refrigerator. Reality was crushing them like a concrete slab. They owned nothing. They were living on borrowed time in my house. They ate my money. They drove my cars. They were, essentially, spoiled children playing house on their grandmother's budget. Then, Jessica's voice broke the silence, small and childlike. "Are you going to kick us out? Kick my children out?" I looked at her with a mix of pity and severity. I could see real fear in her eyes. Without a house, without money, without credit cards, Jessica was nobody. Her entire identity was built on things that did not belong to her. "No, I am not going to kick you out," I said, returning to my spot in front of the cutting board. "Because unlike you, I actually have a memory and I care about family. My grandchildren are not to blame for having parents who are so financially incompetent." I picked up the knife again, but the rules changed today, right now. Robert lifted his head, waiting for the sentence. "First, Robert, you are going to hand over all the credit cards. I am going to cut them up myself. The debt stops here. You will live on your salary, and if it is not enough, you will get a second job or ask your boss for a raise." Robert nodded mechanically. He was willing to accept anything as long as he did not lose a roof over his head. "Second, Jessica." I addressed her as she was still trembling. "That jewelry box stays with me, not to sell it, but as collateral. And you are going to learn how to cook and clean. I fired the maid this morning." "What?" Jessica's eyes widened. "But I do not know how to clean. It will ruin my hands." "Then wear gloves, dear. You can buy them at the grocery store. They cost $2. And you will learn. Because starting tomorrow, you are responsible for making this house shine. And if I see a single speck of dust, or if you ever throw another plate of food, then I will go straight to the notary and execute the revocation clause. And then, yes, you will be out on the street." "But what are you going to do?" Robert asked, confused. "Are you going to stay here watching us?" I smiled. That was the best part. I pulled another document from the binder, a commercial lease agreement. "No, son, I have more important things to do than babysit 2 immature adults. Do you remember the commercial space downtown, the one the shoe store rented?" "Yes," Robert said. Their lease ran out, and I did not renew it. Starting next week, Evelyn's Diner is opening its doors again. Robert and Jessica were left speechless. "Mom, you are almost 70 years old," Robert exclaimed. "That is too much work." "Work is life, Robert. What kills you is inactivity and feeling like a burden. I am going to reopen my diner. I am going to cook for people who actually appreciate my cooking, people who gladly pay and lick their fingers. And with the profits—" I paused, looking Jessica straight in the eyes. "With the profits, I am going to pay for my own luxuries, my trips, my massages, my things. And I am not sharing a single cent with you. You have a roof and basic utilities paid by me. That is all. Food, clothes, gas, and your vices. That is all on you." Jessica stood up abruptly, red with anger but powerless. "This is slavery," she yelled. "You want to keep us as your servants while you play businesswoman." "No, dear, this is called justice. For years I was your servant and your bank. Now we are just balancing the scales." I stepped over to the stove and turned on the burner to heat the oil. "Now, if you will excuse me, I am going to finish my breakfast hash. I have to eat well because tomorrow I start remodeling the space." And I pointed at Jessica with the knife, not threatening, just directing. "When you are done crying, I want you to sweep the front porch. There are a lot of dead leaves, and it looks very ugly." Jessica let out a choked cry of frustration and ran out of the kitchen. I heard her furious footsteps charging up the stairs, followed by the slamming of her bedroom door. Robert remained seated for a moment longer, staring at the black binder on the table, as if it were a deactivated nuclear bomb. "Mom," he said quietly, "would you really have thrown us out?" I stopped cooking for a second and looked at him. I saw the little boy I raised, the man he had become, so weak, so easily manipulated. "Robert, I love you very much, but I love you enough to not let you be a parasite for the rest of your life. Sometimes, son, you have to pull the rug out from under people so they learn to use their own wings." He stood up slowly, took out his wallet, and placed 3 credit cards on the table right next to the binder. I am going to see if the kids need help with anything. he mumbled with his head down and walked out of the kitchen. I was alone again. The oil sizzled cheerfully in the pan. I tossed in the onions, and the sweet, spicy aroma filled the space, erasing the smell of fear and defeat they had left behind. I picked up the credit cards. They sparkled under the kitchen lights. Platinum, gold, black, symbols of a fake status. I found some scissors in the drawer, and with a deep primal satisfaction, I cut them up one by one. Snip, snip, snip. The pieces of plastic fell onto the table like confetti from a party that was over forever. I looked out the window at the backyard. Tomorrow they would come to dig up the lawn for my vegetable garden. The day after tomorrow, I would start painting my diner. The useless old woman was about to show the world, and above all herself, that the fire in her kitchen was more alive than ever. And them? They would have to learn that respect is not demanded by screaming. It is earned, and that the hand that feeds is the only hand that truly rules. I put my documents away. I turned off the main kitchen light, leaving only the stove hood light on, and served myself my breakfast hash. It tasted like glory. It tasted like freedom. The war was over. Now the reconstruction began, and I was the architect. 6 months have passed since the scissors cut up the golden plastics on the kitchen table, and the sound that now wakes this house is not Jessica's hysterical screaming, nor the notifications of declined purchases. It is the crowing of roosters. Yes, roosters. Because where there used to be an immaculate and sterile English lawn that cost a fortune to maintain, there is now a small chicken coop in the back and deep furrows of black earth overflowing with life. The smell of chemical fertilizers and expensive perfumes has vanished, replaced by the sweet scent of tomatoes ripening in the sun and the spicy perfume of fresh basil and herbs. I get up at 5 in the morning, as always, but I am no longer the invisible shadow making coffee. Now I am the master of my time and space. When I go down to the kitchen, I find Robert finishing packing his lunch. He no longer buys food on the street. He takes bean and cheese sandwiches or leftover stew in reusable plastic containers. He has lost weight, but not from stress. It is because he stopped eating the processed garbage they used to buy by the ton. He looks healthier, his skin is less gray, and although he has bags under his eyes, they are from honest hard work, not financial anguish. "Good morning, Mom," he greets me, kissing my forehead. He used to just grunt. "I already set up the coffee maker and washed last night's dishes." "Good morning, son. Are you taking the chopped fruit?" "Yes, I already packed it. Hey." He hesitates for a moment, adjusting the tie he now irons himself. "Thank you for yesterday. That advice on how to declare the extra taxes for the commercial space saved me from a penalty." I smile as I pour my tea. Robert is learning that numbers do not bite if you treat them with respect, just like ingredients. He has discovered that living on his real salary is a difficult puzzle, but putting it together gives a satisfaction that no credit card can buy. At 6:30, Jessica comes down. She no longer wears silk robes at this hour. She is wearing old jeans and a cotton t-shirt, her hair pulled back into a practical ponytail. Her hands, previously adorned with 2-inch acrylic nails, are now short, clean, and sport a Band-Aid or 2 on her fingers. The earth is a strict teacher. It teaches that to harvest, you first have to get dirty. "Good morning, Evelyn," she says, with a tone that carries no venom, though it still keeps a certain respectful distance. "Today is the day to water the squash, right? And I saw the jalapenos are ready to be picked." "That is right, Jessica. Cut them carefully. Use the pruning shears. Do not pull them or you will hurt the plant. I need 4 pounds for the salsa at the diner today." "Okay, oh, and..." She bites her lip, a gesture that has replaced her eye rolling. "Do you think you could teach me how to make Mexican rice? Sam does not like how mine turns out. He says it gets mushy. Yours is always so fluffy." I look her in the eyes. Her pride has not completely disappeared, but it is transformed. It is no longer arrogance. It is the dignity of wanting to do things right. "Of course, dear. The secret is frying it until it sounds like sand and not stirring it so much. I will teach you this afternoon." Watching her walk out to the garden with a basket under her arm is a silent victory. Jessica, the woman who believed food magically appeared in delivery bags, now knows how long it takes for a radish to grow. She has learned to value every leaf of lettuce because it cost her sweat. And funny enough, since she stopped spending on spas and compulsive shopping to fill her void, she looks calmer. Tired, yes, but real. I leave the house exactly at 7. My truck, the one I use for the business, is loaded with the boxes of vegetables my grandchildren helped harvest over the weekend. Sam and Chloe do not spend their days glued to screens anymore. At first it was a war. They cried and threw tantrums when I cut off the premium fiber optic internet, but boredom pushed them out to the yard. Now Chloe has her own sunflower seedling bed, and Sam is in charge of collecting the chicken eggs. They have learned that the useless old woman knows how to do magic with the earth. I drive downtown to the commercial space I took back. The carved wooden sign over the entrance shines with fresh varnish. Evelyn's Kitchen, Heritage Cooking. When I open the metal doors, the smell of my life hits me. It does not smell old or stuffy. It smells of cumin, garlic, and toasted dried chilies. My employees, 2 young women from the neighborhood whom I am teaching the trade, are already there, chopping and cleaning. "Good morning, Miss Evelyn." They greet me affectionately. The meat order arrived. Arthur sent the best cuts and said not to worry about payment, that he will drop by on Friday. I let out a laugh. The irony of life. Arthur, my old friend, is still my supplier, but now on my terms. When I reopened the diner, he was the first one to come eat. He sat at the best table, ordered my dark gravy stew, and with tears in his eyes told me he had missed real food. "Your daughter-in-law bought the most expensive stuff, Evelyn, but she did not know what to do with it. It was a waste of a good product," he confessed to me. Noon arrives fast, and with it the crowd. The place fills up. It is not a luxury restaurant with linen tablecloths and tiny portions. It is a noisy, cheerful diner with sturdy wooden tables and boiling clay pots. We get the lawyers from the nearby firms, the construction workers, the school teachers, and, every now and then, some lost tourist guided by the smell. Today, the special is braised pork ribs with green herb sauce and rice. While I oversee the kitchen, tasting sauces, adjusting the salt, I feel a pair of eyes on me. At table 3, near the window, sits the town mayor with his wife. They are licking their fingers, literally. "Miss Evelyn," the mayor calls to me, raising his glass of sweet iced tea. "This is a national treasure. You should teach us economics classes, because with what you charge and how well you serve, you perform miracles." "They are not miracles, Mr. Mayor," I answer, drying my hands on my apron. "It is administration. Not spending on what is useless and putting love into what actually nourishes." At 3 in the afternoon, when the rush slows down a bit, I see my family walk in. Robert, Jessica, and the kids. They come to eat. They pay their check, just like any other customer. That was one of my conditions. There is food at the house, but if they want to eat at the diner, they support the business. They sit at a table in the back. I see Jessica pull a small notebook out of her purse. She's writing down the menu prices, comparing. She is doing math. Robert looks relaxed, laughing at something Chloe said. Sam is devouring the ribs with a joy I never saw when he ate sushi. I walk over to their table carrying an extra pitcher of water. "Is everything good?" I ask. Jessica looks up. There is no fear in her eyes anymore. There is respect. "The rice," she begins to say, then pauses. "The rice is perfect, Evelyn. Just like you said, you can feel every grain." "Thank you, Mom," Robert says. "Hey, the kids want to know if they can come help wait tables this weekend. They want to save up money to buy a new video game." I look at my grandchildren. Chloe nods enthusiastically. "Yes, Grandma, I can carry the drinks. I promise I will not spill anything." I feel a lump in my throat, but not from sadness. It is pride. In 6 months, they have learned the value of work. They have understood that money does not pop out of a wall, but from the effort of serving others. All right, I tell them, faking sternness, but you come here to work, not to play, and you earn your tips with a smile, not by being my grandkids. Yes, boss, Sam replies, giving a military salute that pulls a smile out of me. I go back to the kitchen and lean against the counter, surveying my kingdom. The clatter of silverware against plates, the laughter, the smell of home cooking, all of this was on the verge of being lost because of my fault, because of my weakness of wanting to give them everything without asking for anything in return. I thought loving them meant solving their lives for them, and I almost turned them into emotional invalids. I pulled my old ledger out of my apron pocket. I opened it to the last page. The numbers were in black, solid, growing. With the diner's profits, I had already made back what they blew through in those 2 years of madness, and then some. But the biggest profit was not written in dollars and cents. The real profit was seeing my daughter-in-law with dirt on her hands, understanding the cycle of life. It was seeing my son sleep peacefully without debt. It was seeing my grandchildren ask for a job instead of demanding gifts. I remembered that awful night, the plate shattering against the wall. Useless old woman. Those words were the fuel I needed. Sometimes contempt is the best alarm clock. If they had not bruised my pride, I would still be sitting in that armchair, knitting and waiting for death while they squandered my legacy. Now I know that usefulness is not measured by youth or beauty, not even by modernity. It is measured by the capacity to support, to nourish, and to teach. I am the foundation of this family. And foundations are not meant to be seen. They are underground, carrying all the weight in silence. But if they shift, the house falls. They learned not to shift the foundation. At the end of the day, when we closed the diner and went back home, the sun was setting over my garden. Jessica got out of the SUV and went straight to check on her squash. "Evelyn!" she yelled from the yard. "Come look, the first flower bloomed." I walked slowly toward her. My knees ached a bit, the fatigue of age, but my spirit was dancing. I crouched down next to her and saw the yellow flower, bright and strong among the green leaves. "It is beautiful, isn't it?" Jessica said, touching the petal with a gentleness I never thought she possessed. "Yes, dear, it is the beginning of the fruit." Jessica stood up and brushed the dirt off her knees. She looked at me and, for the first time in years, she gave me a hug. It was quick, awkward, but sincere. "Thank you," she whispered, for not letting us fall. And I am sorry about the stew. Seriously, I was an idiot. I patted her on the back, feeling her bones, her humanity. "It is in the past, Jessica. Gravy stains, but it washes out. What matters is that now you know food is never thrown away. Food is respected." "It is respected," she repeated like a mantra. We went into the house. The stain on the dining room wall no longer exists. Robert painted over it months ago. Now, on that wall, I hung a picture. It is not an expensive piece of art. It is a black and white photograph of my first kitchen, 40 years ago, showing me, young and strong, stirring a giant pot. Under the photo, I had a small gold plaque placed that reads, "Evelyn's Kitchen," where nobody is useless if they are hungry and willing to work. I sat in my wingback chair, the only old piece of furniture that survived modernity. I took out my knitting needles, but this time not to escape reality, but to rest from a productive day. I listened to Jessica and Robert in the kitchen, making dinner with the vegetables we brought home. They were laughing. They were arguing over whether to add more or less salt, but they were laughing. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. They called me useless. They told me my time had passed, but here I am at 68 years old, running a business, saving a family, and working the earth. It turns out the useless old woman was the only one who knew how the real world worked. And now that they know too, I can finally say my job as a mother and grandmother is truly done. Tomorrow is another day. We have to husk the corn for the weekend cornbread, and I need to teach Jessica how to pick the green tomatoes. But that will be tomorrow. Today, the balance is positive. Very positive. "Grandma, dinner!" Chloe yelled from the dining room. "We made squash with cheese." I smiled. Nothing tastes better than justice served hot, surrounded by family. I got up from the armchair. The useless old woman was hungry, and this time the table was set for me.